Yo, what's good, y'all? Hope y'all are doing well today. So in this video, I'm gonna show y'all how to make a beat for Lil Baby's new album, It's Only Me. I'm gonna show y'all my whole process of how I made the beat from scratch. So all the way from making the sample and adding drums to it. And I'm not gonna say too much else, so let's hop right into the sample. So jumping into the sample here, the first thing I want to talk about is the tempo. For this one specifically, I went with 158 beats per minute, but I'd say anything between about 145 and 165 fits this vibe pretty well. So opening up my first plugin here, the first sound that I got was this grand piano preset from Keyscape. So going into the MIDI here, I started by choosing the key of F sharp minor, and I just wanted to make this kind of catchy and repetitive melody to start with. Usually I'd start with like the bass notes and work my way up, but for this one I just had a melody idea and I wanted to put it down. In using the F sharp minor scale, I'm only using 5 notes out of the scale. I'm using the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth notes, and just using this, I only made the first 2 measures of the pattern, and I duplicated that out for the full 8, and then I took those and I duplicated that over using Control B and put it up an octave by holding Control and the up arrow. Putting those 2 melodies together before effects, it sounds something like this. So to make that sound a little bit more realistic and just more of the tone that I wanted, what I did is I selected all of these and hit Alt-R on my keyboard, and then I went to the randomizer menu here. I only left the levels menu on and adjusted the velocity knob, and then once I did that, left all those notes highlighted, and then I hit Alt-X and used this multiply knob to bring those velocities down a little bit so we're not getting so much of those key noises in there. For effects, I only have one, and it is Portal on the Anxiety preset from the Experiment Club Bank by Producer Grunt. And now with the effects, the keys sound something like this. So the Portal is just giving it a little bit of texture and some extra reverb or space to it. For my next melody sound, I opened up the same piano preset that I had in the last pattern, and instead of putting in a top melody, I was putting in these bass notes. So for these notes, I was primarily just using the same sort of pattern that is in most Lil Baby beats, where I'm starting with the root note of the scale and then moving it down to the 6th note in the scale. So in this case, it's F sharp and D. And I originally just started by penciling in these right here, and I constructed the rest of it by copying these down an octave and reducing them in velocity manually, and then copying them up an octave and also reducing those in velocity. I didn't want to just leave it as just the bass notes. I wanted to add a little bit of movement to it. So what I did is I used the relative 5th note in the scale for each of these. For F sharp, if we make the minor triad, the top note's going to be the C sharp note. So I used that and just placed it half a measure after the original hit. And then I did the same thing when it hit again on the 3rd measure. And then for D, I just used the relative 5th note, which is A in here, and then used B just to kind of build it back up into the C sharp. I made the first 4 measures and then just used Control B to copy it over for the remainder. So after putting in my first 2 piano melodies, I opened up Xenology and I got this 106 strings preset. For the MIDI here, I'm pretty much only just using the minor triad and just one slight variation of it to kind of flesh out the melody a little more and just add another layer to it. So this is an analog strings kind of sound, and so if I'm just moving everything back to the original octave, the melody looks something like this. So if I make the normal F sharp minor triad, I just have F sharp, A, and C sharp, and just using what I know about this chord, what I can do is I can either move this middle note down 1/2 step or move this top note up 1/2 step just to build tension. I originally started off with the interval here, and then I just moved my way into this, and I put this up an octave to make it stand out a little more. Same thing with this top note here at the end. I moved it down 1 octave just to make it stand out. And similar to the last melodies, I only constructed like the first half of it and then hit Control B to duplicate it for the rest. For effects on the analog strings, I put a low cut, a high shelf, and a cut in the mids to cut out some of the harsher sounds. And then I opened up Portal and went to the same Experiment Club bank and I got this swing preset. So after putting in those first few melodies, I created this Countermelody using this crazy layer preset in Serum. And for this, I just was using that same minor triad and just different variations of the notes of it to create a Countermelody here. So with this, I was originally just starting with this minor triad and I just wanted to make different variations. So similar to the last one, I was just moving this note down 1/2 step and this top note up 1/2 step. This melody, I didn't have it a whole lot in the sample. I just used it during some of like the breakdown portions or the parts where it was a little less busy and I just wanted to add a bit of a switch up to it. So after putting in that bell Countermelody, I went into Arcade, went to the Distant Voices line and got this Ancient Message vocal bank, and I went and selected the key of F sharp minor and then put it up an octave. Once I did that, I went into the MIDI here and I just laid out some vocal chops to layer along with what we already have. For effects on the vocal chops, I put on an EQ to cut out the lows and some of the muddiness in the mids. I went to RC20 and turned all the effects off and just put some space on it to add some reverb. And then I put on Fruity Love Filter on the low pass 2 preset. And for my last melody sound, I went and put in this sub bass. I kept it really basic. I was just following the bass notes of the lower piano melody. So once I had all those stems, I rendered each of them out as an audio clip and put them into the playlist. To round out the sample, I added these accents here and just a transition sound. For the accent, I got this from one of Max Shooter's kits and I pitched it to key. And I only really used like the first half of that, and this was the lower octave one. So what I ended up doing is I copied this over, clicked on the top left of the clip and hit make unique. And then I double clicked on it and opened up the audio menu again and pitched it up by 1 octave. For effects on it, I just have RC20. Again, I only have the reverb on it. After that, I rendered it out as an audio clip here. I arranged the rest of the stems to my liking and rendered out the final loop. So once I had the finished loop, I imported it into a new FLP and I set the project tempo to 158, which is the same as the loop. I went into the audio clip menu and set the mode to stretch. I pitch shifted it down by 100 cents or 1/2 step. So the key of the drums and the finish track are in F minor. For the drums, I tried to keep it relatively simple because we already had a whole bunch of components with the sample. So for my first drum sound, I got this clap and I layered it with this snare. And I just had them both hit on the same spot, which is the 3rd beat of every measure. And then on the 4th and 8th measures, I put it on the and of the 1st beat with a lower velocity. After that, I added my hi-hats. I'm just using a 2-step basis. And for the rolls, I think for all of these, I just used the 1/3 step snap to grid. After putting in the hi-hats and the claps, I went and grabbed the snare sound. And I put in the first of my couple snare patterns. The first one is the bass pattern. It hits on pretty typical spots. For the most part, it's just on the off beats here. And I just adjusted the velocities a little bit. After that, I added my second snare pattern, and this lines up with the 808 roll from one of the 808 patterns. For all of it, except for the roll, I used the 1/3 beat snap to grid, and for the roll here, I believe I used the 1/3 step snap to grid. After putting in my snare patterns, I opened up this open at sound, and I just placed it in some pretty typical spots. And then for my last sound, I grabbed this southside or spins 808. Similar to the sub bass and piano bass notes, I just followed the pattern of the 1/6 bass pattern. And for my first 808 pattern here, I threw in this roll at the end, and the roll is using the 1/3 beat snap to grid. And then for my second 808 pattern and the last drum pattern, I pretty much just have the same thing that I did with the last one, except the roll at the end just follows the same pattern here. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you for making it this far in the video. If you did, leave any thoughts, recommendations, or feelings for me in the comments. And that's going to do it for me. So I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Roll up, Tess.